The Hindu Kush mountains rose like broken teeth against the pale dawn sky, each peak carved by wind and time into something that didn't forgive mistakes. At 9,200 feet, the air was thin enough to make lungs burn, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Sarah Chen lay prone on a ridge of black rock, her eye pressed to the scope of a Macmillan TAC-50 rifle that had once belonged to her father. 3,247 meters downrange, a man stood on a balcony carved into the mountainside. Hassan Rahman, Taliban commander, killer of 63 American soldiers, the man who had murdered her father 20 years ago. Sarah's finger rested feather-light on the trigger. Her breathing had slowed to 4 counts in, 6 counts out. Her heart rate had dropped from 68 beats per minute to 54. The crosshairs settled between Rahman's shoulder blades with the inevitability of gravity. The wind whispered across her face from 2 o'clock. 12 miles per hour. Steady. No gusts yet. 3.247 kilometers. The kind of distance where bullets fell more than they flew, where wind became destiny, where only the exceptional or the desperate even attempted the shot. Sarah Chen was both. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared. Recoil slammed into her shoulder like a sledgehammer wrapped in divine judgment. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's 4.2-second journey, watched it arc through the thin mountain air, watched Hassan Rahman jerk forward as 8,000 foot-pounds of energy arrived exactly where mathematics and instinct had promised. The man who killed her father collapsed into the doorway and didn't move again. "Hit," Commander Jack Mason whispered beside her, his voice tight with something that might have been awe. "Confirmed kill. Jesus Christ, Sarah. 3,247 meters. That's..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. They both knew what it was. Impossible. But that moment, that shot that would haunt her dreams and define her future, came later. 3 weeks later, after everything changed. This story begins 25 years earlier, when Sarah Chen was 7 years old and her father was still alive. The Virginia morning smelled like gun oil and cut grass. 7-year-old Sarah sat cross-legged on a shooting mat, watching her father's hands move with the precision of a surgeon. Gunnery Sergeant James Phantom Chen was cleaning his rifle, a ritual Sarah had watched 100 times but never tired of. "Why do they call you Phantom, Daddy?" Her father looked up, his eyes crinkling with the smile he saved just for her. "Because I see things other people don't. Because I move quiet. Because when I take a shot, it's like a ghost reached out and touched someone from impossible distance." He set down the cleaning rod and picked up a small rifle, a .22 caliber youth model that looked enormous in Sarah's small hands when he passed it to her. "You ready to try again, baby girl?" Sarah nodded, suddenly nervous. She'd tried shooting before, never hit anything. The older kids at the range laughed, said girls couldn't shoot, said she was too small, too weak, too scared of the noise. Her father seemed to hear her thoughts. "Close your eyes," he said quietly. Sarah obeyed. "Don't think about the target. Don't think about the gun. Just feel the wind. What's it telling you today?" Sarah sat very still. At first, she felt nothing. Then, slowly, she became aware of the gentle pressure on her right cheek, the way the grass bent slightly to the left, the cool touch of air that smelled like pine trees and morning dew. "It's gentle today," she whispered, "like it's not trying to push, just touching." When she opened her eyes, her father was staring at her with an expression she'd never seen before, something between pride and fear. "That's the gift, Sarah. Most people calculate wind. You feel it. That's rare. That's special." He paused. "Gifts are burdens too. Remember that." Sarah didn't understand then. She was 7. She just wanted to hit the target. Her father positioned her behind the rifle, adjusted her grip, her breathing, the angle of her body. His hands were patient, gentle, teaching without words what words couldn't teach. "Find the space between heartbeats," he murmured. That's where the shot lives. Sarah breathed, in for 4 counts, out for 6, felt her pulse slow, found that quiet space her father had described. Squeezed the trigger. 100 yards downrange, the paper target shuddered. Dead center. Perfect. Sarah gasped. Her father laughed, a sound of pure joy. Again, he said. She fired 4 more times, 5 perfect holes in a group smaller than her fist. Her father was quiet for a long time. Then he picked up his own rifle and placed it beside hers. You have the gift, baby girl. Better than mine, maybe. Stronger, purer. His voice changed, became serious in a way that made Sarah's stomach tighten. But you don't have to use it. You understand? Having a gift doesn't mean you owe anyone. You get to choose. Sarah looked up at him, confused. Choose what? What kind of person you want to be. The gift is just a tool. You decide what you build with it. That memory lived in Sarah's mind like a photograph. Perfect. Preserved. The last truly happy moment before everything broke. 17 months later, her father deployed to Fallujah. He never came home. 25 years later, Sarah Chen stood in her workshop at Quantico Marine Corps Base, running her fingers along the barrel of an M40A3 sniper rifle. The morning sun cut through the single window, illuminating dust particles that danced like stars in her private universe. Perfect bore, she murmured to herself, peering through the barrel toward the light. 0 throat erosion. This rifle's been babied. At 27, Sarah had perfected the art of being overlooked. Standing 5'3" in her work boots, wearing oversized coveralls that hid her frame, she moved through the base like a ghost. The Marines who brought their rifles for calibration saw a pretty face and dismissed the mind behind it. They called her Barbie with a Barrett when they thought she couldn't hear. She heard everything. The door burst open without warning. Sarah's hand instinctively moved toward the Sig Sauer P226 she kept hidden beneath her workbench, a habit from a life she pretended not to have. But she recognized the silhouette immediately. Colonel Nathan Webb filled the doorway like a monument to wars that never ended. At 68, his shoulders still carried the weight of command, though he'd officially retired from active duty 5 years ago. His silver hair was military short. His blue eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. The Vietnam Combat Infantry badge on his chest had been earned in blood 50 years earlier. Sarah, not a greeting, a statement. She straightened, wiping her hands on a rag that had seen cleaner days. Colonel Webb, you don't usually visit my workshop. This isn't a social call. Webb stepped inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. The click of the latch sounded final, like a coffin lid. I need you. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had dreaded it, had somehow longed for it in the darkest hours of sleepless nights. I'm an equipment tech, she said carefully. I fix rifles. I don't use them. Stop! Webb's voice cut like a blade through her deflection. He moved closer, his weathered face showing every one of his 68 years, showing every firefight, every friend lost, every decision that cost lives to save lives. I've known you since you were 7 years old. I served with your father for 15 years. I watched him become the best sniper this country has ever produced. I was there when he died. Webb paused. And I've been watching you for 5 years. The words hit like a physical blow. You've been following me? Protecting you, like I promised Phantom I would. Webb pulled a tablet from his jacket, tapped the screen twice, and turned it toward her. The surveillance footage showed Sarah at a private range 40 miles outside Alexandria. Night vision green. Timestamp 0237 hours, 3 days ago. She was alone, firing her father's Macmillan TAC-50 at targets placed at increasingly impossible distances. 1,000 yards, 1,200, 1,500. Every shot dead center. Webb swiped to another video. Another night, another perfect grouping at extreme range. You go 3 times a week, sometimes 4. You shoot for 2 hours, then you pack up and disappear. You think you're hiding what you are. You think you're running from Phantom's legacy. Webb's voice softened slightly. But you can't hide a gift like yours, not from someone who knows what to look for. Sarah stared at the screen, feeling exposed, violated, understood in a way that made her want to run. Why are you telling me this now? Webb swiped the tablet again. A new image appeared. A man in his late 50s stood on a balcony carved into a mountainside. Afghan mountains by the terrain. He wore traditional robes, but his eyes held a predator's calculation. Gray beard, a face that had watched too many people die. Hassan Rahman, Webb said quietly. They call him the Wolf, Taliban commander, responsible for 17 separate attacks on U.S. forces in the last 3 years. 63 American soldiers dead, 38 wounded. Sarah's throat went dry. Why are you showing me this? Webb was silent for 3 long seconds. When he spoke, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Because 20 years ago, in November 2004, Hassan Rahman planned an ambush in Fallujah. An ambush specifically designed to kill one man. He paused. Your father. The workshop seemed to tilt. Sarah gripped the edge of her workbench, knuckles white. James Chen, gunnery sergeant, scout sniper, call sign, Phantom. Webb's eyes never left hers. Rahman knew Phantom was the greatest threat to his network, the ghost who could reach out and touch anyone from impossible distance. So Rahman sacrificed 12 of his own men to set a trap. An elaborate trap. Perfect bait. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. He knew. Yes. My father knew it was a trap, and he went anyway. Because 40 Marines were pinned down 2 kilometers away. They needed covering fire. They needed time to retreat. Your father was the only one with the angle, the skill, the position to give them that time. Webb paused. He chose them over himself. Sarah closed her eyes. Her father's face materialized in the darkness. His gentle smile, his patient hands showing her how to breathe, how to squeeze a trigger between heartbeats, how to read wind in the dance of grass and leaves. He chose them over me, she whispered. He chose to give you a world where 40 families stayed intact, where 40 Marines came home to their children. He chose to be the kind of father who taught his daughter what honor looks like, even if the lesson cost him everything. Sarah opened her eyes. Why are you telling me this now? Webb swiped the tablet one more time. Satellite imagery showed a compound nestled in Afghan mountains. High resolution, recent timestamp. Because Hassan Rahman is still alive, still killing American soldiers, still walking free 20 years after he murdered your father. Webb looked at her with an intensity that made her want to run. And 2 weeks ago, we finally found him. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Send a drone strike, Sarah said. Too many civilians in the compound, wrong optics, international complications. Webb shook his head. We need precision. We need a sniper. Sarah laughed, but the sound held no humor. You have an entire Marine Corps full of snipers. Why? Because our primary is injured. Because this mission deploys in 72 hours. Because the team lead is Commander Jack Mason, former SEAL, military contractor now. Webb paused. He was with your father in Fallujah. Phantom saved his life. Twice. The name hit like a fist. Sarah had heard it before, in her father's letters. The ones she'd found after his death, written but never sent. Letters where Phantom spoke of his best student, a young SEAL with instinct that transcended training. What's my role? Sarah heard herself ask. Equipment specialist, officially. Backup sniper, unofficially. Webb's eyes softened slightly, the only crack in his armor. Sarah, I've watched you practice at that range for 5 years. I've known what you do every night, what you are. Heat rushed to her face. Anger, shame, something else she couldn't name. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting you, like I promised Phantom I would. Webb leaned against the workbench. You inherited your father's gift, maybe exceeded it, but you've been hiding, living small, pretending to be less than you are. Why? Sarah's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the cold metal of the bench. The truth clawed its way up her throat before she could stop it. Because everyone who knew Phantom expects me to be him, to fill his boots, to carry his legacy. Her voice broke. I can't be him. I'm just Sarah. You're wrong, Webb straightened. You're not just Sarah. You're the woman who shoots 1 minute of angle groups at 1,000 yards, who can read wind like your father read books, who has a gift that comes once in a generation. He picked up the tablet. And you're the only person who can kill the man who murdered Phantom. The workshop fell silent, except for the distant sound of Marines training. Their cadence calls drifted through walls like ghosts of wars past and wars to come. Sarah looked at her hands, mechanics' hands, scarred from metal edges and hot rifle barrels, but steady, always steady. When do we leave? The conference room smelled like stale coffee and testosterone. 5 men sat around a table covered with satellite imagery, weapon specs, and mission parameters typed in 12-point font that somehow made death seem bureaucratic. Sarah stood in the doorway, still wearing her coveralls, feeling every eye turned toward her like searchlights. The man at the head of the table stood slowly. Commander Jack Mason looked exactly like his photographs. 6'1", gray hair cut military short, a scar tracing his left cheekbone like lightning frozen in flesh. 62 years old and built like he could still ruck 20 miles with a full combat load. His pale blue eyes assessed her in 3 seconds flat. Frank, Mason said, not looking at Webb, I asked for a sniper. This is Sarah Chen. Mason's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition. Maybe pain. James Chen's daughter. Yes, I respected Phantom more than any man I've served with. Mason's voice carried the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He saved my life twice. I owe him everything. He paused. But respect doesn't win firefights. Experience does. She's a tech. This is Tier 1 work. Sarah felt the familiar burn of dismissal, that special kind of erasure reserved for women in men's spaces. She'd learned long ago that arguing only made it worse, so she stayed silent, watching, cataloging weaknesses. The other 4 men studied her with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Daniel Medic Wright had the lean build and watchful eyes of a man who'd seen too many friends die. British accent, former SAS, 58 years old, according to the brief Webb had given her. He sipped coffee and said nothing. Travis Bear Morgan looked like his nickname. Massive shoulders, barrel chest, hands that could crush walnuts. The heavy weapons specialist wore a Texas Rangers cap and contempt like a second skin. Sean Torres, the communications specialist, had the calculating look of someone who trusted technology more than people. Former Navy, 47. Pragmatic. Dangerous in the quiet way that mattered. Robert Priest Kane sat apart from the others, Bible open on the table beside mission docs. The primary sniper, 52. Gray-bearded with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd looked through a scope at another human being and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Mission brief, Mason said. Target, Hassan Rahman. Compound in Hindu Kush Mountains, eastern Afghanistan. Distance from optimal shooting position, 3,200 meters. Target appears Tuesday and Friday mornings, 0600 local time. 14 seconds maximum exposure. He tapped the satellite image. Priest is primary shooter. Miss Chen is... Sarah, she said quietly. Mason looked at her. Excuse me? My name is Sarah, not Miss Chen. And if I'm on this team, use my name. The room went silent. Bear snorted. Medic raised an eyebrow. Torres typed something on his laptop, possibly updating his life insurance. Mason studied her for 5 long seconds. Sarah will provide equipment support and function as backup if needed. Backup. Priest's voice carried the soft drawl of Kentucky hills. Sir, with respect, 3,000-meter shots aren't something you learn in a workshop. Agreed, Mason said, which is why she'll qualify before we deploy. He turned to Sarah. You want on my team? Prove it. Tomorrow, 0900. Range, 1,000 yards standard Marine qualification. Pass is 7 out of 10. Your requirement is 10 out of 10. Sarah met his eyes. Fair enough. Perfect score, Bear muttered. She'll fold. Sarah smiled, a small, cold expression that made her look exactly like her father's photographs. We'll see. Dawn came to Virginia like a reluctant promise. Cold, gray. The kind of morning that made you question decisions made in warm offices, far from consequences. Sarah arrived 30 minutes early. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night in her apartment disassembling and reassembling her father's rifle. A ritual she'd performed 1,000 times. Muscle memory and meditation combined. The range stretched before her like Judgment Day. 1,000 yards of Virginia soil. Autumn grass brown from early frost. The distant target barely visible without magnification. Mason's team assembled like pallbearers at a funeral. They brought coffee and thermoses, skepticism in their postures. Webb stood apart, saying nothing. His faith in her either unshakable or cruelly misplaced. 8 Marine instructors gathered as well. Word had spread. The daughter of Phantom Chen was attempting qualification. They came to witness legacy or watch it crumble. Mason checked his watch. You're early. Habit. Sarah opened her rifle case slowly, deliberately. The Barrett M82A1 inside gleamed like a surgical instrument. Standard issue. Not her father's rifle. That stayed home, too sacred for this particular kind of proving. She assembled the weapon with economical movements. Stock, barrel, scope, magazine. Each click and snap precise. No wasted motion. The weather briefed itself. 18-mile-per-hour crosswind from 3 o'clock. Temperature 42 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold bore. The barrel hadn't been warmed by previous shots, which meant her first round would fly different from the rest. Bear lit a cigarette. Money says she doesn't make it past shot 3. I'll take that action, Medic said quietly. 20 says she makes 7. 50 says she makes all 10, Webb announced. Everyone turned to stare at him. That's a sucker bet, Colonel, Priest said. Then take it. Priest didn't. Sarah settled into position, prone, bipod legs extended and firm against packed earth. Left hand supporting the stock. Right hand featherlight on the grip. Finger outside the trigger guard until ready. The rifle weighed 30 pounds. The moment weighed more. She pressed her eye to the scope. The world narrowed to crosshairs and target. Wind and mathematics. Breathing and patience. Her father's voice echoed in memory, patient as sunrise. Feel the wind, Sarah. Don't calculate it. Feel it. She closed her eyes, listened to the grass whisper secrets, felt the cold air kiss her cheek from the right. Consistent, steady, no gusts yet. 18 miles per hour meant she needed to adjust 4.2 minutes of angle right to compensate for wind drift at this distance. Temperature correction, 0.8 MOA for cold bore in ambient temperature. Total adjustment, 3.4 MOA right. Sarah's hands moved with the autonomy of long practice, adjusting the scope's windage knob. Click, click, click. Each click a quarter MOA. 13 clicks right. 3 clicks down for cold bore. She opened her eyes, settled her breathing. 4 count inhale, 4 count exhale. Heart rate dropping from 68 to 56 beats per minute. The rifle became an extension of her body. No separation between flesh and metal. The target sat 1,000 yards downrange, 10-inch X-ring at the center. Hit that, you were a shooter. Hit it 10 times, you were a sniper. Sarah inhaled. half exhaled, squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The Barrett roared, 50 caliber fury. The recoil slammed into her shoulder like divine retribution. But she rode it, stayed on target through the scope, watching. 3 seconds later, the time it took the bullet to fly 1,000 yards, the target shuddered. Hit, one of the Marine instructors called through binoculars. X-ring. Bear dropped his cigarette. Lucky shot. Sarah didn't respond. She chambered the next round. The bolt action smooth as silk. Settled back into position. Same wind, same calculations. Same cold mechanical process that transformed thought into death at distance. Shot 2, X-ring. Shot 3, X-ring. Shot 4, X-ring. By shot 7, the Marines had stopped talking. The only sounds were wind through grass, the Barrett's periodic thunder, and the distant ping of bullets punching paper. Sarah fired shot 8, then 9. Each report identical. Each impact devastating. She chambered the 10th round, settling into the rifle one last time. Moving target! Mason's shout cracked across the range like a whip. Before Sarah could react, the downrange target began tracking left to right. Pulled by cables she hadn't known existed. 3 miles per hour lateral movement. Not part of standard qualification. Not fair. Every instinct screamed protest. This wasn't the test. This was sabotage. But Sarah's hands didn't listen to instinct. They listened to training. To thousands of hours at that private range, shooting in conditions her father had deliberately made impossible. Moving targets, wind, rain, snow, darkness. When conditions are perfect, Phantom had written in one of his letters, you're not training, you're just confirming what you already know. Sarah tracked the target through her scope. Calculated lead time. At 1,000 yards, a target moving 3 miles per hour needed 14 inches of lead to compensate for both target movement and bullet flight time. She shifted aim, led the target, breathing controlled, heart rate steady, squeezed. The Barrett spoke its final judgment. 4 seconds of flight time felt like years. The bullet intercepted the target mid-movement, punching through the X-ring like destiny had always known exactly where that piece of copper-jacketed lead would end up. Hit! The Marine instructor's voice carried something that might have been awe. Dead center, moving target. Sarah safed the rifle and stood slowly. Her shoulder would bruise. 50 caliber rounds in rapid succession guaranteed that, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. She turned to face Mason and his team. No one spoke. Mason walked forward, boots crunching on gravel. He stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that she could see every line that combat had carved into his face. He looked at the Barrett in her hands. That's quite a toy for a technician. The words hung in the cold morning air, dismissive, sharp. Sarah felt something ignite in her chest. Not anger, something colder, more precise. She looked up at him. 6 inches of height difference that suddenly meant nothing. Her voice came out level, hard, absolutely calm. You think that's a toy? That's a Barrett 50 caliber. She didn't blink, didn't look away. This rifle has more confirmed kills at extreme range than most snipers accumulate in entire careers. It's killed enemy combatants from distances you've never even attempted. She took 1 step closer, close enough to see his pupils dilate. And I'm not a technician, Commander. She paused. Let the silence stretch. Let him feel the weight of what came next. I'm James Chen's daughter, sir. The range fell into silence so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Still steady at 56 BPM, Mason stared at her. The calculation happening behind his eyes was almost visible. Reassessment, recognition, something that might have been respect fighting something that definitely was prejudice. Webb's voice broke the moment. Any other questions, Jack? Mason's jaw tightened. He looked at Sarah for 5 more seconds, then stepped back. Gear up, wheels up, 0600 tomorrow. Welcome to the team. He turned and walked away. His men followed like iron filings pulled by a magnet. Medic paused beside Sarah. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 30 years. He smiled slightly. I'm hoping for brave. Sarah watched them go. Adrenaline finally beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Webb approached quietly. Your father would have been proud. Would he? Sarah's voice cracked. I don't even know if this is what I want, or just what everyone expects. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Webb looked toward the target 1,000 yards away, where 10 bullets had written their verdict. But you're going. Sarah looked at the Barrett in her hands. Her father had carried a rifle just like it, had killed men with it, had died because of it. In a way, died because being a warrior meant walking into traps with eyes open. I'm scared, she whispered. Good. Fear makes you careful. Arrogance gets you killed. Webb squeezed her shoulder gently. Trust your training. Trust yourself. That night, Sarah packed in her small Alexandria apartment. The ritual felt ceremonial, religious in its precision. Clothing designed for mountain cold, medical supplies, protein bars that tasted like cardboard but kept you alive, extra socks. Her father had been fanatical about dry socks. And then, from the back of her closet, she pulled out the hard case. The rifle inside wasn't standard issue. Custom McMillan TAC-50, bolt action, 50 BMG, 42 pounds of precision engineering. Her father's rifle. Left to her in a will that she'd read once and never again because the words hurt too much. The stock was worn where his cheek had pressed against it 10,000 times. The barrel showed micro scratches from desert sand and mountain grit, and engraved along the receiver, in letters her father had carved himself, Phantom's Legacy, for Sarah. She ran her fingers over the words, feeling their depth. I don't know if I can do this, Dad, she whispered to the empty apartment. I don't know if I'm enough. The rifle, of course, said nothing, but somewhere in her chest, in the place where memory lives stronger than reason, Sarah heard her father's voice. You're more than enough, baby girl. You always have been. She closed the case gently, like tucking a child into bed. Tomorrow she would board a C-17 transport headed for war. Tomorrow she would face men who doubted her, a mission that might kill her, and a target who'd murdered the man who taught her everything that mattered. Tomorrow, Sarah Chen would stop hiding. Tonight, she allowed herself one last moment of being small, of being scared, of being just a 27-year-old woman who missed her father and wished the world was different. Then she locked that feeling away in the same place she kept her fear and her doubt, stood up and started loading magazines. The war could wait until morning, but preparation was something her father had taught her never to postpone. Feel the wind, his voice echoed in her memory. Don't calculate it, feel it. Sarah closed her eyes and felt the gentle press of conditioned air from her apartment's heating vent. Consistent, predictable. Nothing like the mountains of Afghanistan, where the wind came angry and wild and unforgiving. But she would learn to feel that wind too. She had to. Because in 72 hours, at an impossible distance, she would take a shot that would either prove her worthy of her father's legacy or destroy any hope she'd ever had of escaping it. The rifle case sat by her door, ready, waiting, just like Sarah Chen, just like Phantom's daughter. The C-17 Globemaster's engines screamed their metal prayer to physics and thrust. Sarah sat in the cargo bay surrounded by Mason's team, the rifle case between her knees, heading toward mountains that had broken empires and men in equal measure. The interior smelled like hydraulic fluid and nervous sweat. Red overhead lights cast everything in shades of blood. Bear sat cleaning his weapons with methodical precision, the kind of ritual soldiers performed when words failed. Torres typed on a ruggedized laptop, checking satellite imagery one more time. Medic read a worn paperback, though Sarah noticed his eyes hadn't moved across the page in 5 minutes. Commander Jack Mason sat across from her, studying mission documents. After 20 minutes of silence, he looked up. His pale blue eyes held something Sarah couldn't quite name. Recognition, maybe, or ghosts. "Your father," he said. Not a question, just an opening. Sarah waited. "Ramadi, 2003. Mason's voice carried the flat authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but underneath ran something softer. Memory, perhaps, or debt. Insurgent ambush on convoy. We were taking fire from 4 positions simultaneously. Coordinated attack. Professional. He paused, looking not at Sarah but through her, into a desert 13 years gone. I was a lieutenant then, 37 years old, and thought I was invincible. Had my whole platoon pinned down in a kill zone. RPGs coming in from the north. Machine gun fire from an apartment building to the east. We were dead. All of us. Just a matter of time. Bear had stopped cleaning his weapon. Torres's fingers were still on the keyboard. Even Medic had lowered his book. This was a story they'd never heard, and in the special operations community, stories were currency more valuable than medals. "Then I hear this voice on the radio," Mason continued. "Calm, like he's ordering coffee. Viper 6, this is Overwatch. I have 4 tangos. Give me 6 seconds and get your boys moving on my mark." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She'd heard that call sign before. Overwatch. Her father's voice in old recordings her mother had saved before the cancer took her too, 3 years after Fallujah. "I didn't even respond," Mason said. "Couldn't believe anyone could make that shot. 4 different positions, 4 different ranges, all while under fire himself. But 6 seconds later, exactly 6 seconds, I hear the first shot, then the second, third, fourth, like a metronome, like God himself was pulling the trigger." Mason's hands had stilled on the documents. His knuckles were white. All 4 insurgents went down. 4 shots, 4 kills, ranges from 1,100 to 1,400 meters. In combat, under fire, with a spotter he'd never worked with before. He looked directly at Sarah now. "Your father saved 40 Marines that day, including me." The cargo bay was silent except for the engine's drone. Sarah wanted to speak but couldn't find words that didn't sound inadequate. "He never told me combat stories," she finally managed. "Only training, breathing techniques, wind reading, how to calculate drop and drift. He'd take me to the range on weekends, teach me fundamentals. But he never talked about Ramadi or Fallujah or any of it." Mason nodded slowly. "Because he wanted you to have a choice, waiting you to choose this life, not inherit it." He paused. "Most military families, the kids grow up hearing war stories, glorified tales of heroism and victory. Phantom never did that. He kept the war separate from you, kept it contained so it wouldn't infect your childhood." "But it did anyway," Sarah said quietly. "How could it not? He died when I was 7. That infected everything." "Fair point." Mason folded the documents, set them aside. "Your mother, how is she?" "Dead 3 years after Dad. Cancer." Sarah's voice was flat, practiced. She'd said these words so many times they'd lost their edges. "Breast cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. She fought for 18 months, died when I was 10. Mason's expression shifted. Something cracked in that weathered face. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." "Most people don't know. Colonel Webb raised me after that. Well, not raised exactly. I lived with foster families, but Webb checked on me, made sure I stayed in school, made sure I had what I needed." Sarah looked down at her hands. "He knew about the night shooting, the secret practice. He's known for 5 years and never said anything, just watched." "That's Webb," Mason said. "Patient, strategic. He plays the long game." He leaned forward slightly. "But I need you to understand something, Sarah. Out there in Afghanistan, there's no room for playing roles or hiding what you are. People die when warriors pretend to be something less than they are." "I'm not pretending," Sarah said. "I genuinely don't know what I am. A mechanic who can shoot? A shooter who hides in a workshop? Ghost's daughter who'll never measure up? All of those? None of them? Mason studied her for a long moment. You shot 10 for 10 at 1,000 yards. That's not luck. That's not genetics. That's 10,000 hours of practice. In secret. Doesn't matter where. Matters that you did it. Mason's voice softened slightly. Ghost trained you well. I can see his methods in your shooting. The breathing, the way you read wind, the patience. But there's something else. Something that's just yours. What do you mean? Phantom was methodical, mathematical. He'd calculate everything 3 times before he pulled a trigger. You're different, you feel it. I watched you on that range. You adjusted for that moving target without conscious thought. Pure instinct. Mason smiled slightly. That's not something that can be taught. You're either born with it or you're not. Sarah thought about that. About all the nights at the range, shooting in conditions her father would have called impossible. Wind, rain, darkness, moving targets she'd set up herself. She'd never thought of it as instinct, just training. Tell me about Fallujah, she said quietly. What really happened? How did he die? Mason's face went still. The question hung in the air like smoke. What do you want to know? Everything. Webb said it was a trap, that Rahman planned it specifically to kill my father. I want to know why Dad walked into it. Why he chose 40 Marines over his 7-year-old daughter. The cargo bay suddenly felt smaller, closer. Bear had stopped all pretense of cleaning weapons. Torres had closed his laptop. Medic had set aside his book. This was the story they'd all been waiting for. The truth behind Phantom's death. Mason reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a small device. An old recording unit, military issue from 2 decades ago. He held it up so Sarah could see. I kept this, he said. Kept it for 20 years. Probably against regulations. Probably should have turned it in with the rest of the mission materials. But I couldn't. He looked at the device. Your father's last radio transmission. The classified one. The one that didn't make it into official reports. Sarah's heart hammered. I've read the reports, the official ones. They said he engaged 4 hostiles, took fire, was killed in action. That's the sanitized version. Mason turned the device over in his hands. This is the real one. I recorded it because I knew someday someone would need to hear it, need to understand. He looked at Sarah. I think that someone is you. You ready? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Mason pressed play. The sound quality was poor, crackling with interference and distance. But underneath the static, Sarah heard a voice she'd spent 20 years trying to forget, and failing. Her father's voice. Calm, measured, professional even as death approached. Overwatch to Viper 6. Jack, listen to me. Mason's younger voice responded, tight with stress. Phantom, we have Marines pinned down. Grid November Tango 7-4. We need fire support now. I see them. I also see the setup. Her father's voice. So familiar it hurt. This is a trap, Jack. Specifically designed. They're using your Marines as bait. For what? For me. A pause. Distant gunfire. Rahman knows I'm here. He's sacrificed 12 of his own men to create this situation. The Marines are pinned in a perfect kill zone, and the only angle for effective fire support is this position. My position, which is exactly where Rahman wants me. Sarah's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her knees. Jack's voice on the recording. Then we abort. Find another way. There is no other way, not in time. Her father's breathing was steady. I've got the angle. I've got the shot. I can take out enough of them to give your Marines a window to retreat. At what cost? My choice, Jack. Not yours. Not the Corps'. Mine. A longer pause. More gunfire. Closer now. I need you to listen carefully. After this is over, after I'm gone, I need you to do something for me. Sarah realized she was holding her breath. Tell my daughter something. Tell Sarah I'm sorry. I'm sorry I won't see her grow up. Won't walk her down the aisle. Won't meet her children. won't grow old watching her become the woman I know she'll be. Sarah's vision blurred, tears she'd held for 20 years finally breaking through. Her father's voice continued, steady despite everything. But most of all, tell her I'm sorry if she thinks she has to become me. Tell her I want her to be better than me. Not just better at shooting, better as a human being. Tell her to use violence only when necessary and choose peace whenever possible. A pause, heavy breathing, the unmistakable sound of rounds impacting nearby. Tell her this was my choice. Nobody's fault. Not hers, not yours, not the Marine Corps, just mine. I chose this. I chose to give her a world where 40 families stay intact, where 40 Marines come home. That's the world I want her to grow up in. Another pause. When her father spoke again, his voice was softer, almost tender. Tell Sarah I love her. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her wherever I am, whatever comes after, I'm watching her with pride so profound, it would break me if I wasn't already so completely filled with joy at having been her father. Final pause. Sounds of movement. Rifle being positioned. Shoot straight, Jack. Take care of my baby girl. Overwatch out. The recording ended. Silence filled the cargo bay. Sarah couldn't stop the tears now. 20 years of grief and anger and confusion and loss, all of it rising like a tide that couldn't be held back. Mason waited, let her cry. The team looked away, giving her privacy in the only way possible in a confined space. These were men who understood loss, who'd carried their own dead, who knew some wounds never healed, just learned to exist alongside the living. After a long moment, Sarah wiped her eyes. Her voice came out rough. He knew it was a trap and went anyway. Yes, he chose them over me. No, Mason's voice was firm. He chose to give you a world where sacrifice meant something, where honor wasn't just a word, where 40 families stayed whole. He leaned forward. Your father didn't choose them over you, Sarah. He chose the kind of world he wanted you to grow up in, a world where warriors stand up when standing up is hard, where the strong protect the weak, where one person's sacrifice can mean 40 families don't lose their sons and fathers and brothers. Sarah looked at him. Did it work? Did the Marines make it out? All 40, not a single casualty. Mason's voice dropped. Your father took out 6 insurgents in 8 seconds, gave us the window we needed. We extracted everyone. But Rahman's forces converged on Phantom's position. By the time we fought our way to him, he didn't finish, didn't need to. How did you get his body out? Carried him 12 kilometers through hostile territory. Took 16 hours, 4 firefights, but we got him home. We don't leave our people. Ever. The C-17 began its descent. Sarah felt the pressure change in her ears, the shift from journey to arrival, from past to present, from grief to purpose. Commander, she said. Jack, he corrected. On this team we use first names. Hierarchy matters less than trust. Jack, when we're in position, if the shot comes to me, will you trust me? Mason looked at her for a long time. Through the small window behind him, Sarah could see the Hindu Kush mountains rising like the teeth of ancient gods. Jagged, unforgiving, the kind of terrain that killed the careless and tested the strong. Ask me again when we're on target, Mason said, which wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. The plane touched down hard at Bagram Airfield. Tires screamed against runway. The massive aircraft shuddered and slowed. Through the closing cargo door, Sarah could see the sprawling base. Acres of tents and buildings and aircraft. A small American city carved into hostile territory. They disembarked into afternoon heat that felt wrong after the mountains they'd be climbing toward. Bagram at 3,000 feet felt almost tropical compared to the thin air that awaited them at Firebase Phoenix. A Marine captain who looked impossibly young met them on the tarmac. His desert camouflage was crisp, but his eyes were old. Combat did that. aged you from the inside out. Commander Mason, the captain said. Captain Hendricks, I'll be your liaison for in-processing and transport to Phoenix. Mason shook his hand. How's the situation? Stable for now. No major contacts in your operational area for 72 hours. Taliban have been quiet. Too quiet if you ask me. I didn't, Mason said without malice, but noted. What's the weather looking like? Clear for the next 48 hours. After that, we've got a system moving in from the north. Could ground helicopters for 2 to 3 days. Then we need to move fast. Mason glanced at his team. How long to Phoenix? Chinook's fueled and ready. 30 minutes flight time. You'll be there before sunset. They loaded gear onto a waiting truck. Sarah's ruck weighed 65 pounds. The rifle case another 42. Total load, 107 pounds. Her own body weight was 118. The math was simple and brutal. She'd be carrying 91% of her body weight across 18 kilometers of mountain terrain, climbing 600 meters in elevation, in temperatures that would kill exposed skin in minutes. Bear watched her heft the ruck. You need help with that? No. Pride's a good way to get hurt. So is assuming I'm weak. Sarah met his eyes. I carried 90 pounds in qualification training. This is just 17 more. Bear's expression shifted slightly. Not quite respect, not yet, but reassessment. Fair enough. The Chinook helicopter was a beast. Twin rotors that could lift 10 tons of cargo or 55 combat-loaded troops. The crew chief helped them load, then they were airborne, banking hard toward the mountains. Through the open door, Sarah watched Afghanistan scroll beneath them, brown and gray and occasional patches of green where water permitted life. It looked harsh, biblical, the kind of landscape where prophets wandered and empires died. First time in country? Medic asked, settling beside her. Yes. Thought so. You've got that look. Wonder mixed with dread. He smiled slightly, British accent making everything sound more civilized than it was. I've done 4 tours here. Different wars, same mountains. They don't change. We do. How? We get older, more cautious, less certain that we know what we're doing. He looked out at the mountains. When I was 25, I thought I was invincible. By 35, I knew better. Now at 58, I'm just trying to keep everyone alive long enough to go home. Do they? Go home? Most of them, not all. Medic turned to look at her directly. Your father, Phantom. I never met him, but his reputation survived him. Legends in this community don't fade, they grow. That's the problem, Sarah said. How do you live up to a legend? How do you be better than someone who's been mythologized for 20 years? You don't, Medic said simply. You be yourself, do your job. Let others decide if that's legendary or not. He paused. Jack told us who you are, Phantom's daughter. Most of us didn't even know he had a daughter. But I'll tell you something, your father's legacy isn't his kill count or his impossible shots. It's the 40 Marines who went home to their families because he chose duty over survival. Sarah absorbed that. Jack played me the recording, Dad's last transmission. Did it help? I don't know. It explained why, but it doesn't make it hurt less. It's not supposed to. Medic's voice was gentle. Loss isn't something you get over, it's something you carry. The goal isn't to stop hurting. The goal is to learn to carry the hurt without letting it break you. The Chinook began its descent toward Firebase Phoenix. The base clung to the mountainside like a barnacle to a ship's hull. Desperate, stubborn, refusing to be dislodged. Sandbags and HESCO barriers and concertina wire transformed geology into military geometry. They landed in a swirl of dust and noise. Rotor wash created its own sandstorm. Sarah stepped off the ramp into cold that bit through her tactical gear and found her bones. -5 Celsius, wind at 12 miles per hour, gusting to 18. The kind of cold that made metal stick to skin, that turned breath to ice crystals. that killed careless soldiers in their sleep. "Welcome to Hell's waiting room," Bear said, shouldering his massive pack. "Temperature drops another 10 degrees after sunset. Frost gets in your weapon systems. Better check that fancy rifle." Sarah said nothing. She'd already done the calculations. At this altitude and temperature, her bullet's ballistic coefficient would change. Less air resistance meant flatter trajectory, but also more wind drift. The cold would affect powder burn rate, reducing muzzle velocity by approximately 30 feet per second. These were the kinds of details that separated good snipers from dead ones. Captain Hendricks led them to a plywood hut that smelled like diesel fuel in desperation. A large satellite image was blown up to poster size on the wall. "The target compound." "Target is here," Hendricks said, tapping the image. 8 kilometers northwest. Elevation 9,200 feet. Intel confirms Hassan Rahman maintains residence. Appears on eastern balcony Tuesday and Friday mornings, 0600 local time. Approximately 14 seconds exposure. "Approximately," Mason said. Not a question, a note of concern. 12 to 16 seconds. Variable. He's not setting a timer. We've observed him over 6 months. Pattern is consistent, but not precise. "What security?" Mason asked. 30 to 40 fighters. Patrols, but predictable. They sweep the perimeter every 4 hours. Your infiltration window is 2200 tonight. Next patrol is 0200 tomorrow. Sarah studied the compound through the grainy satellite resolution. 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape. The eastern balcony jutted from the main structure like an afterthought, maybe 6 feet wide, 30 feet above ground level. No cover, no concealment. Anyone standing there for 14 seconds was either stupid or confident. Rahman was not stupid. "Optimal shooting position?" Mason asked. Hendricks traced the map with his finger. "Here, ridge designated Echo 7, 3,247 meters from target balcony." Sarah's mind converted instantly. 2 miles plus another 135 feet, the kind of distance where bullets fell more than they flew, where wind became your enemy or ally, depending on how well you read its intentions. "Wind conditions?" Bear asked. "Variable, 8 to 15 miles per hour. Direction shifts with thermal currents. Morning shoot window gets the calmest conditions," which meant still nearly impossible. Mason looked at his team. "Questions?" Sarah raised her hand slightly. Everyone turned. "Has anyone actually confirmed Rahman appears exactly at 0600, or is that an average of observed appearances?" Hendricks blinked. "Intel report says 0600. "That's not what I asked." Silence stretched. The captain shuffled papers, found a different document. "Observations over 6 months. Appearances range from 0553 to 0607. So we have a 14-minute window where he might appear for 14 seconds. Sarah looked at Mason. "That changes timing calculations for security avoidance." Mason's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Recognition, or maybe reassessment. "Good catch," he said. "We adjust patrol timing based on 0550 window." He looked at Hendricks. "What else don't we know?" The briefing continued for another 30 minutes. Every detail examined, every assumption questioned. This was how professionals worked. Slowly, methodically, leaving nothing to chance when chance could mean death. As they filed out to prep gear, Mason touched Sarah's shoulder. "That question about the timing window, that's the kind of detail that saves lives. Don't ever hesitate to speak up. Even though I'm the junior member, especially because you're the junior member. Fresh eyes see things experienced eyes miss." He paused. "Phantom taught you to think, not just shoot. That's his real legacy." They departed Firebase Phoenix at 2200 hours under a moonless sky. The Hindu Kush swallowed them like Jonah into the whale. Dark, absolute, transformative. Sarah's night vision goggles turned the world into shades of green. The terrain unfolded in alien beauty, rock and scree and patches of snow that glowed faintly in starlight. The team moved in tactical column, 30 feet between each operator, weapons ready, eyes scanning. The pace Bear set was brutal, fast, aggressive. Sarah understood immediately. This was another test. Prove you can't keep up. Prove you don't belong. She'd seen this dance before in 100 small ways throughout her life. Doors held closed, opportunities withheld, respect conditioned on meeting standards no one else had to meet. So she kept pace, controlled her breathing, 4 counts in through the nose, 6 counts out through the mouth. Oxygenation maximized. Heart rate steady at 122 beats per minute, high but sustainable. The mountains unfolded in shades of darkness, rock and scree and patches of snow. The team moved like ghosts, silent except for the occasional crunch of boot on stone. Sarah's ruck dug into her shoulders. Her thighs burned. Her lungs ached in the thin air, but she kept moving. After the first hour, Medic dropped back beside her. "You holding up?" "Yes." "That pack is heavy." "I know. I'm fine." He studied her for a moment, then nodded and moved forward again. At 0315, they were 8 kilometers from Firebase Phoenix and 8 kilometers from target compound. Halfway. In the valley between destinations where soldiers were most vulnerable. Torres, walking point, stopped suddenly. His fist went up, the universal military signal for freeze. Everyone stopped. Sarah's hand moved to her M4 carbine. Selector switched from safe to semi with a click that sounded too loud in the mountain silence. Torres knelt, examining the trail. His hand moved slowly, tracing something in the dirt. Then he looked back at Mason, and even through night vision, Sarah could see the fear in his eyes. "Wire," Torres whispered. The word hit like electricity. IED, improvised explosive device. Hidden pressure plate or tripwire connected to artillery shells or homemade explosives. The Hindu Kush was littered with them. Left over from Soviet occupation, from Taliban resistance, from decades of war layered on war. "Nobody move." Mason's voice carried absolute authority. "Torres, can you trace it?" Torres pulled out a red lens flashlight, the kind that preserved night vision. He swept the beam slowly across the trail. The thin wire glinted like a spider's web in the red light, stretched across the path at ankle height. "Trace goes that way." Torres pointed right into rocks. "I can't see the device without—" The world exploded. Sarah never knew what triggered it. Maybe Torres's light. Maybe a pressure plate they hadn't seen. Maybe the device was on a timer, and their arrival was just catastrophically bad luck. The blast picked her up and threw her backward like a child's toy. She flew through air with no control, no orientation, just force and momentum, and the certainty that this was how she would die. Not in combat, not making an impossible shot, but in a random explosion in mountains that didn't care about her father's legacy or her own dreams or anything human at all. She hit rock hard. Her helmet cracked against stone and stars bloomed behind her eyes. Constellations of pain. The ringing in her ears drowned out everything. No sound, just a high-pitched whine like the universe screaming. Sarah lay still, checking for damage. Fingers moved, toes moved, legs responded, arms functioned. She tasted copper, blood from a split lip or bitten tongue. She rolled onto her hands and knees, shaking her head to clear it. The world swam, then slowly stabilized. The blast site was a crater, smoke and dust still rising. The team was scattered, dark shapes on the ground, some moving, some terrifyingly still. "Report!" Mason's voice cut through the ringing. "Sound off." "Medic operational." The British accent steady as always. "Bear, good." The big Texan stood, limping but mobile. "Torres, concussed but functional." "Sarah," she tried to speak, coughed, tried again. "Operational." Silence. Priest, Mason called. Report. Nothing. Medic was already moving, checking bodies with practiced urgency. Sarah struggled to her feet, ignoring the protest from her ribs, and moved toward them. Priest lay on his side, right arm bent at an unnatural angle, blood covering the right side of his face. His breathing was shallow, rapid, the sound of lungs struggling. Shrapnel to shoulder and face, medic reported, hands already working. Pressure bandages appeared like magic. Right eye damaged, possible skull fracture. He needs medevac now. Mason was already on the radio. Phoenix Actual, this is Hunter 7. IED strike. One urgent surgical. Request immediate dust-off. Static. Then, Hunter 7, Phoenix Actual. Negative on dust-off. Weather system moving in. Bird can't fly in these conditions. ETA for medevac? 48 hours minimum. 48 hours. Mason stared at the radio like he could will it to give different answers. I'm aware, Hunter 7. I'm sorry. You're on your own. Mason looked at his team, at Priest bleeding and broken, at the target compound 8 kilometers away, at the mission window that was closing with every second. Sir, medic said quietly, I can stabilize him, but he can't shoot. Zero depth perception, shoulders destroyed. Can he survive 48 hours? If we keep him warm, if the wound doesn't get infected, if he doesn't go into shock. Medic's tone made clear those were all very big ifs. But he's combat ineffective. Mason looked at the sky, at the stars that had watched empires rise and fall in these mountains. His jaw worked. Sarah could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Duty versus mission. Lives versus objectives. The kind of math that aged commanders decades in moments. We abort, Mason said finally. Get Priest back to Phoenix. Mission secondary to personnel. Sir, Bear stepped forward. Rahman, if we abort, he goes to ground. We lose him. I'm not sacrificing the mission for one man. I'm bringing my people home. All of them. Always. With respect, Torres said carefully, what if there's another option? Everyone looked at him. Sarah. The name hung in the thin mountain air, heavy with implications. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her, weighing, measuring, doubting. Mason turned to her slowly. In the red glow of chemical light sticks Medic had cracked for medical work, his face looked carved from granite. No, he said. Absolutely not. Sir, she qualified perfect, Bear said. She's got the skill. She's got a 1,000-yard qualification. This is 3,000 meters plus in mountains with variable wind. It's not the same thing. Neither is letting Rahman walk away, Bear countered. Sarah thought of her father walking into an ambush in Fallujah, knowing it was a trap, going anyway because 40 Marines needed him. Legacy wasn't just skill, it was choice. The choice to stand when standing was hard, to shoot when the shot was impossible. To be more than just Phantom's daughter, to be someone who made decisions that mattered. I can make the shot, Sarah said quietly. Mason stared at her. You don't know what you're saying. 3,000 meters is not... 3,247 meters, Sarah interrupted. At 9,200 feet elevation, temperature approximately -2 Celsius, wind 8 to 15 miles per hour, variable direction. Bullet flight time, 4.2 seconds. Total drop approximately 341 minutes of angle. She paused, meeting his eyes. I know exactly what I'm saying, Commander. Knowing the math isn't the same as making the shot. Then teach me. Sarah stepped closer. You have 12 hours before the shoot window. You were Phantom's best student. He trained you. Train me in 12 hours. Remind me what I already know. Mason's face showed the war. Pragmatism against protection. Mission against responsibility. Here's the deal, he said finally. Old school. No ballistic computers, no apps, no technology, Just fieldcraft. The way Phantom taught me in the 90s. Why? Sarah asked. Because batteries die in cold. Electronics fail in mountains. But wind reading? Breathing? Range estimation? That's eternal. That's what made your father a legend. Not technology. Instinct refined by 10,000 hours of practice. He looked at the team. Medic stays with Priest. Bear and Torres provide security. Sarah and I continue to Echo 7. 12 hours of training. If she's not ready when the window opens, we abort. Clear? Clear, Sarah said. They moved through darkness like ghosts, leaving behind Priest's shallow breathing and Medic's quiet prayers. The 8 kilometers to ridge position felt longer than the 8 they'd already traveled. Each step weighted with new purpose. Mason stopped frequently, testing Sarah's knowledge. Wind check. Sarah closed her eyes, felt the air on her face. 11 miles per hour from 2 o'clock. Steady, no gusts. How do you know no gusts? The sound. Gus whistle. This is smooth flow. Good. Temperature effect on powder burn? Every 10 degrees Celsius change affects muzzle velocity approximately 4%. We're at -2. Rifle will be cold-soaked. Estimate velocity loss 30 to 35 feet per second from standard. They climbed. Rock gave way to snow, then back to rock. The Hindu Kush tested every muscle, every joint, every cell that needed oxygen the thin air wouldn't provide. At 0500 hours, they reached Echo 7 Ridge. The position was perfect. A natural shelf of rock overlooking the valley. The target compound was visible 3,247 meters away. Small, distant, impossibly far. Mason unpacked his ranging equipment, confirmed the distance with laser. 3,247 exactly, as briefed. Sarah set up her father's rifle. The Macmillan TAC-50 settled onto its bipod like coming home. She checked the bore, the scope, the trigger pull. Everything perfect, everything ready, except her. Talk to me, Mason said, settling beside her with his spotter scope. What are you feeling? Scared. Good, fear makes you careful. Arrogance gets you killed. He adjusted his scope. Now tell me the shot. Sarah looked through her scope. The compound jumped into magnification. 3 buildings, the eastern balcony, the door that would open and reveal her target. Range 3247, elevation angle -4.3 degrees, temperature -2 Celsius, wind. She paused, feeling, not calculating, feeling. 10 miles per hour, variable direction 2 to 3 o'clock. Calculations. 341 MOA elevation for drop. Wind call 7.2 MOA right for 10 miles per hour. But if wind shifts to 3 o'clock, I need 8.8. Coriolis effect at this latitude adds 0.8 MOA right. Temperature effect -1.1 MOA elevation. She closed her eyes, the math flowing like music. Total adjustments, 340 MOA up, 8.0 MOA right, adjustable if wind changes. You memorized all that? My father taught me to see numbers like colors. This isn't math, it's just knowing. Mason was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. He taught you well, better than he taught me. They waited as the skies shifted from black to gray, that liminal space before dawn when the world held its breath. Sarah thought about Priest 8 kilometers away, bleeding, about her father dead 20 years, about all the moments in life that came down to single decisions, single shots, single chances. Tell me about Fallujah, she said quietly. What happened after my father died? Mason adjusted his spotter scope, checking the compound for movement. We extracted. 40 Marines made it out. 3 didn't, including Phantom. We carried his body 12 kilometers through hostile territory. Took 16 hours, 4 firefights, but we got him home. We don't leave our people. Did he suffer? It was fast. He made his shot, took out 6 tangos in 8 seconds. They returned fire, Concentrated fire on his position. He was hit in the chest. Mason's voice went rough. Died in my arms. His last words weren't about the mission. They were about you. Sarah felt tears threaten. I don't know how to be better than a legend. You're already better. You just haven't proven it to yourself yet. At 0530, Torres's voice crackled over the radio. Hunter 7, Overwatch. Contact. 20-plus hostiles 400 meters north of your position, moving your direction. Mason grabbed binoculars, scanned. Confirmed. It's a security sweep. They're early. ETA to your position? Sarah asked. 8 minutes. Target window is 0550 to 0607. I know. Mason keyed radio. Bulldog, be advised. We have company inbound. Maintain position in silence. Copy, Bear's voice came back. Mason looked at Sarah. We have a problem. Security sweep arrives at our position in 8 minutes. Target might appear in 20 minutes. We'll be in a firefight when the shot window opens. Or we abort now, Sarah said. Or we abort. She looked through her scope at the compound. At the balcony where a man who'd killed her father would stand for 14 seconds, offering the only chance for justice she might ever get. There's a third option, Sarah said slowly. I'm listening. Rahman's running a security sweep. That means he knows something's wrong. Possibly knows we're here. She turned to Mason. If he's paranoid enough for random sweeps, he's paranoid enough to check the perimeter himself before his scheduled appearance. That's speculation. No, that's psychology. Sarah's voice was steady. You don't send security unless you're worried. And if you're worried, you want visual confirmation before you expose yourself. I think he appears early. Not 0600, closer to 0550. Maybe even 0545. Mason studied her. If you're wrong, we're blown, and he escapes. If I'm right, we complete the mission before the sweep reaches us. The mountains held their breath. Somewhere below, 20 Taliban fighters moved toward their position. Minutes away. Somewhere in the compound, a man who'd killed Phantom prepared for his day, unaware that legacy was about to come calling. That's a hell of a gamble, Mason said. It's not gambling, it's reading the pattern. Careful people verify threats. Trust me. Sarah looked at him. Trust my father's training. Mason keyed his radio. Bulldog, stand by. We're holding position for early target appearance. Say again, sir? We have... I know what we have. Trust Sarah's read. Hunter 7 out. He looked at her. If this goes wrong, it won't. You sound like your father. Good. At 0543, as security forces closed to 600 meters, as the skies shifted from gray to pale blue, the compound door opened. Hassan Rahman stepped onto the balcony. Sarah's heart rate, steady at 62, dropped to 54. Everything else faded. The security sweep, the cold, the fear, all of it burned away in the focus that made champions and legends and people who could do impossible things. Rahman wore traditional Afghan robes, brown and weathered. His gray beard caught the early light. He held binoculars, scanning the mountains, looking for threats he could sense but not see. Target, Mason whispered. Range 3247, wind 10 miles per hour, 2 o'clock, steady. You have the shot. Sarah's world narrowed. The rifle became her body. The scope became her eye. The bullet waiting in the chamber became her will. She felt the wind on her face. 10 miles per hour. Steady. No gusts yet. The morning calm before thermal currents started. Her breathing slowed. 4-count inhale. Hold. 6-count exhale. Heart rate 52. Rahman turned slightly, presenting his back. Not ideal. Center mass was best, but backs worked if the angle was right. Sarah settled the crosshair between his shoulder blades, adjusted for wind, for distance, for the weight of 20 years of grief and 10,000 hours of training. Wind shift, Mason said. 12 miles per hour now. 3 o'clock. Sarah adjusted without thought. 8.8 MOA right instead of 7.2. Small changes at this distance meant life or death. He's turning, Mason said. About to go back inside. 6 seconds. That's all she had, maybe less. Sarah inhaled, full breath, let half out, held. Found the space between heartbeats where the world went still and eternal and perfect. Her finger, feather light on the trigger, began to squeeze. Not a pull, a squeeze. Gentle, inevitable. The Macmillan TAC-50 roared. Recoil slammed into her shoulder. 36 foot-pounds of energy trying to break bones. Sarah absorbed it, rode it, stayed on target through the scope. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, 50 caliber, 750 grains of copper-jacketed lead, angry and precise. Flight time, 4.2 seconds. Sarah watched through her scope, not breathing, as the bullet flew. She could almost see it, a dark streak against pale sky, arcing up from the ridge toward the valley, dropping, wind pushing it right, gravity pulling it down. Rahman was halfway through the doorway when the bullet arrived. The impact was catastrophic. The 50 caliber round hit between his shoulder blades with 8,000 foot-pounds of energy. His body jerked forward violently, then collapsed, disappearing into the doorway like a puppet with cut strings. Hit, Mason said, voice tight with awe. Confirmed hit. Target down. He stayed on the spotter scope, watching, waiting. Confirmed kill, Mason said. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Holy God. 3,247 meters. Sarah, that's impossible. Sarah chambered another round automatically. Training overriding emotion. She kept the scope on the doorway, watching for movement. Nothing. The compound exploded into activity. Fighters poured from buildings. Alarms sounded. Chaos bloomed like blood and water. Security sweep breaking in to run, Torres reported over radio. They heard the shot. ETA your position 4 minutes. Time to leave, Mason said. He started packing gear with professional speed. Sarah stared through the scope at the doorway where Rahman had fallen, where the man who'd killed her father had breathed his last breath, never knowing his death had been waiting 20 years. She thought she'd feel satisfaction, victory, something clean and complete. Instead, she felt hollow, empty, like she'd carried a weight so long that without it, she didn't know how to stand. Sarah, Mason's hand on her shoulder, we need to move, now. She nodded, packed the rifle with hands that shook slightly, not from fear, from adrenaline crash, from the enormity of what she'd just done, from the knowledge that she'd crossed a line her father had crossed, and there was no going back. They ran. The Hindu Kush Mountains, indifferent to human drama, watched as 2 figures sprinted across rock and scree, pursued by men with guns who didn't know they were chasing ghosts. Behind them, 2,300 meters of ground between ridge and rendezvous point, a fighting retreat that would test everything they had. The extraction became a blur of violence. Sarah transitioned to her M4, covering sectors while Mason called in artillery support. She dropped 8 more Taliban fighters during the 47-minute retreat. Controlled bursts at ranges between 200 and 400 meters. Faces she could see. Men who dropped and didn't rise. 9 kills total. 9 men who'd woken up that morning not knowing it was their last. A grazing round caught her left shoulder. The impact spun her sideways, but she kept moving, kept fighting, kept living because that's what warriors did. By the time the Black Hawk extracted them, Sarah had crossed into a place her father had been. A place where you carried the weight of death you'd caused and learned to keep walking anyway. The Black Hawk carved through Afghan sky like a bullet through flesh. Fast, violent, purposeful. Sarah sat pressed against the vibrating hull, her shoulder throbbing. her hands still trembling with adrenaline that refused to fade. Mason sat beside her, face streaked with dust and dried blood from a grazing wound across his cheek. He'd barely spoken since they'd loaded onto the helicopter, just checked his team methodically, counted heads, confirmed everyone was breathing. Now he looked at Sarah, really looked. The way people looked at soldiers after their first combat, searching for cracks, for breaks, for the moment when the person you were disappeared and something else took residence in your skin. "Talk to me," he said, voice barely audible over the rotors. Sarah stared at her hands. They looked like her hands. Same fingers, same scars from working on rifles, but they felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. "I killed 9 people today," she said. "You completed the mission. You saved your team. You did what had to be done. Does it get easier?" She looked at him. "Did it get easier for you?" Mason was silent for a long time. "No. Anyone who says it gets easier is lying or broken. You just get better at carrying it." He paused. "Your father asked me the same question once, after his first kill in combat. What did you tell him?" "I told him the day it stops bothering you is the day you need to stop pulling triggers." Mason leaned back against the hull. "You're not a killer, Sarah. You're a warrior. There's a difference. Warriors do hard things because someone has to. Killers do hard things because they want to." Sarah closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw Raman's body jerk from the bullet impact, saw the 8 other men drop during the retreat, saw their faces frozen in that final moment between living and not. "I don't feel like a warrior. I feel like I'm drowning." "Then drown," Mason said. "Let it wash over you. Don't fight it. The ones who fight it, who try to pretend they're fine, they're the ones who break later. Feel everything now. Process it, then pack it away somewhere safe." The helicopter banked hard, beginning its descent toward Bagram airfield. Through the open door, Sarah could see the sprawling base, a small American city carved into hostile territory. The debrief took place in a secure room deep inside Bagram's intelligence section. Windowless, soundproof, the kind of room where classified operations were discussed and uncomfortable truths were filed away. 3 men sat across the table from Sarah and Mason. 2 CIA officers in civilian clothes, 1 Army colonel with a Special Operations Command patch and eyes that cataloged everything. "Commander Mason," the colonel said, "walk me through the mission." Mason's report was crisp, professional, delivered without emotion. He detailed the infiltration, the IED blast, Priest's injuries, the decision to continue with Sarah as primary shooter. 3,247 meters, one of the CIA officers said. "That's beyond the current record by approximately 300 meters. He looked at Sarah. "You made this shot?" "Yes, sir." "Under combat stress? With hostile forces closing on your position?" "Yes, sir." The 3 men exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them. "This stays classified," the colonel said finally, "for Miss Chen's protection and operational security. No official record, no public acknowledgement. Understood?" "Understood," Mason said. The CIA officer opened a folder, slid documents across the table. "We recovered intelligence from Raman's compound." He paused, looking at Sarah directly. "The 2004 Fallujah ambush. It was a trap, planned specifically to kill Phantom. Hassan Rahman spent 3 months setting it up, sacrificed 12 of his own men, all to eliminate the one sniper he feared most." Sarah's world narrowed to the document in front of her. "Your father knew," the officer continued. "Intelligence suggests he received warnings. He went anyway." "To save 40 Marines," Sarah said quietly. "Yes," the colonel leaned forward. "Your father made a choice. Nobody ordered him. He volunteered because that's who James Chen was. He chose to give you a world where sacrifice meant something, where honor wasn't just a word." Sarah stared at the documents until they blurred. Her father's final choice, preserved in official type and classified stamps. "Is there anything else, sir?" she asked. "Not at this time. You'll be contacted regarding recognition for this operation." Dismissed. By the time they walked out of the secure room, the Afghan sun was setting, painting the Hindu Kush in shades of orange and red. Back at the transient quarters, Webb waited with a worn envelope in his hands. "Your father gave me two things before Fallujah," Webb said quietly. "The Scout sniper tab for Palmer to hold, and this letter, for you to open when you became a warrior." Sarah's hands trembled as she took it. The envelope was yellowed with age, sealed with wax that bore her father's thumbprint. She broke the seal. Inside, a single sheet in her father's precise handwriting. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. Sorry I won't see you graduate, won't walk you down the aisle, won't meet your children, won't grow old watching you become the woman I know you'll be. But most of all, I'm sorry if you think you have to become me. That's the opposite of what I want. You probably think I wanted you to be a soldier, a sniper, another phantom carrying forward some legacy. You're wrong. I trained you because I saw a gift greater than mine. Natural ability surpassing anything I could teach. I wanted you to have the option to use it if you chose. But Sarah, hear me clearly. You don't owe me anything. Not continuation of my career, not vengeance. Not becoming a warrior because your father was one. You owe yourself everything. The chance to discover who Sarah Chen is, what she wants, what gives her life meaning beyond impossible shots. The shot you've made, the one that led you to open this, proves you have skill. But skill without purpose is just mechanics. I don't want you mechanical. I want you fully, completely, beautifully human. Three things. First, I died by choice. If I'm gone, it's because I sacrificed myself for something that mattered more than survival. Don't grieve the decision. Honor it by living fully. Second, you are more than my daughter, more than my legacy, more than my skills wrapped in a smaller package. You are Sarah Chen, unique, exceptional, worthy of respect and love, regardless of whether you ever pick up a rifle again. Third, I'm prouder of who you are than what you do. Your kindness matters more than your accuracy. Your character matters more than your kills. Your humanity matters more than your warrior skills. The world will try to define you by your talents. Don't let it. Define yourself by your choices, by the life you build, by the people you love, and the causes you serve, and the version of yourself you see in the mirror. Be better than me, Sarah. Not just as a shooter, as a human being, as someone who uses violence only when necessary and chooses peace whenever possible, as someone who teaches as much as she fights, as someone who builds as much as she destroys. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, not to the Marines, not to the world, not even to me. You proved everything I needed the first time you smiled at me as a baby. Everything else is footnotes. Live fully, fight when you must, teach always, love deeply, and know that wherever I am, whatever comes after, I'm watching you with pride so profound it would break me if I wasn't already so completely filled with joy at having been your father. Shoot straight, shoot true, my beautiful daughter. And when you're done shooting, put down the rifle and dance. All my love, forever and always, Dad, Phantom. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Each reading uncovered new layers, new permissions. Her father hadn't wanted her to become him. He'd wanted her to become herself. And Sarah, sitting with tears streaming and a smile breaking through like sunrise through storm, finally understood. She was Sarah Chen, instructor, operator, warrior, teacher, Phantom's daughter, and her own person, capable of impossible shots and choosing not to take them. Strong enough to kill and wise enough to know when killing wasn't the answer. She didn't have to choose between teaching and operating, between peace and war, between being her father's legacy and being herself. She could be all of it, everything, the full, complicated, beautiful reality of a human being who contained multitudes. 4 months later, Sarah stood at Quantico on a gray September morning, the smell of rain and new beginnings. Colonel Webb met her at the sniper school building. "Walk with me." They walked in silence past Marines running training evolutions, past ranges where rifles spoke in practice cadence. Inside the main classroom, 35 people in dress uniforms. At the front, a podium and American flag worn from operations. Sarah recognized some faces: Mason and his team, several sniper school instructors, and scattered throughout, older men, 50s, 60s, some pushing 70, wearing uniforms with scout sniper tabs and ribbons that told stories of wars. "Who are they?" she whispered. "Marines your father trained," Webb said. "Marines who served with him. They came to honor his legacy." An ancient man stood at the podium. 74 years old with a spine age in combat couldn't bend. His uniform bore more ribbons than Sarah could count. "Sergeant Major Thomas Palmer," Webb said quietly. "He trained your father in the 90s. Palmer's voice carried decades of authority. "26 years ago, I trained a young Marine named James Chen, arrogant, stubborn, gifted beyond measure." He looked directly at Sarah. "Phantom became the best student I ever trained, made shots I wouldn't have attempted, saved lives I couldn't have saved." Palmer paused. "When he died in Fallujah, I lost proof that the world could produce men like that." Sarah felt her throat tighten. 3 weeks ago, Colonel Webb told me James Chen's daughter made a shot at 3,247 meters, under combat conditions, under enemy fire, with hostile forces closing. Palmer's voice dropped. "I told him that was impossible, that only Phantom could have made that shot." He stepped down, approached Sarah directly, pulled from his uniform jacket a small wooden box, worn smooth by handling. "Your father gave me this before his last deployment, told me to hold it until his daughter was ready, until she'd proven she was more than his legacy, until she'd become her own legend." He opened the box. Inside, on faded red velvet, lay a small metal tab, worn, scratched, stained with sweat and time and desert sand. Phantom's Scout Sniper Tab. Palmer lifted it with gentle reverence. "James Chen wore this for 15 years, through Iraq, through Afghanistan, through every mission where he put his life on the line." He pinned the tab to Sarah's shirt. The metal settled over her heart. "Welcome to the Brotherhood, daughter of Phantom. You've honored his memory and exceeded his hopes." Palmer stepped back, came to attention, saluted. Then, like a wave spreading through the room, all 35 veteran snipers rose to their feet. They stood at attention, backs straight despite decades of wear, and saluted in unison. The silence was deafening. These men who'd fought in Korea, the Cold War, Desert Storm, Fallujah, Kandahar, standing as one to honor Phantom's daughter. "To Phantom," Palmer's voice rang out, "and to his legacy." "To Phantom," the room echoed. Sarah couldn't hold the tears anymore. 20 years of grief and fear and doubt, finally resolving into something she could carry. Palmer embraced her, this ancient warrior pulling her close in a hug that felt like being wrapped in history. "He loved you more than life. Never doubt that. This is just confirmation of what Phantom always knew." The ceremony continued. Mason stepped forward, told the story of the mission. Bear admitted his prejudice had almost cost them everything. Medics spoke about Sarah's refusal to quit even when wounded. Then the older Marines shared stories about Phantom, stories Sarah had never heard. About her father as a young Marine, as a warrior who'd made impossible shots and impossible decisions, and remained humble through it all. By the time it concluded, Sarah was emotionally exhausted, barely standing. Later, as people began to leave, Webb approached with 3 folders. "Job offers," he said. "Instructor position, Marine Corps consultant, Mason's company partnership." He set them on a table. "You don't have to decide now, but know this. Your father's legacy continues with you. How you carry it forward is your choice. Sarah looked at the folders, at the Scout Sniper tab on her chest, at the faces of men who'd known her father and now knew her. I'll think about it, she said. 4 months later, January, Sarah's first day as sniper instructor at Quantico. 14 students, mix of branches, 2 women, 12 men, ages 24 to 38, all looking at their instructor with curiosity and skepticism. Sarah stood at the front in instructor's uniform, the Scout Sniper tab over her heart, her father's legacy visible. I'm Sarah Chen, she said. For 8 weeks, I'll teach you advanced sniper skills. Some will pass, some won't. This course isn't about being tough. It's about making impossible shots under impossible conditions. Questions? A young sergeant raised his hand, 26, Army Ranger. Ma'am, no disrespect, but what qualifies you? The room tensed. Sarah smiled. Fair question. I qualified perfect on 1,000-yard standard. I've made shots exceeding 3,000 meters under combat conditions. I've worked with the best snipers this country has produced. She paused. And I learned from the best teacher possible, my father, Gunnery Sergeant James Phantom Chen. The room went silent. But I'm not teaching you to be him, Sarah continued. I'm teaching you to be better versions of yourselves, to combine old-school fieldcraft with modern technology, to be warriors who think as much as they shoot. She turned to the whiteboard. First lesson, the rifle isn't your primary weapon. Your brain is. The rifle is just a very loud pencil for writing corrections. Let's talk about aiming that pencil correctly. The morning sun cut through the windows. Outside, Marines trained. Rifles spoke. The world continued its endless preparation for conflicts yet to come. Sarah Chen stood before her first class, wearing her father's legacy, but living her own life. Not running anymore, not hiding, just standing in the light, carrying what needed to be carried, teaching what needed to be taught, being better than Phantom, not as a shooter, as a human being who chose when to fight and when to teach, when to kill and when to save, when to be a warrior and when to be simply, beautifully human. Somewhere in memory, her father's voice. Shoot straight, shoot true, baby girl, and don't forget to dance. Sarah smiled. She was learning to dance, and the music was her own.